this audience is not sleeping, because I like to bring you greetings and a lot of energy from Guyana and our indigenous peoples of Guyana, especially the Makushi people that I cherish so much, even though that I'm a Lokono. I always wonder, why am I treading on the mountain area? But I realized that this morning I was on top of the mountain in a vehicle rather than on my feet. So my first time in St. Vincent. Well, as the speaker before had just introduced me as Grace Robert Simon. That's my English name, or European name, I call it. But my real Lakota name is Sabantu Tukoroho, meaning lovely or beautiful flower. I am now employed with Irokrama International Center for Rainforest Conservation and Development. I'm the Community Relations Manager. I work in collaboration with the 20 communities within the North Rupununi District Development Board, which we call the NRDDB, which is part of our partnering and that we share a relationship with. My topic this evening, I won't say this evening, this afternoon, is the impact of climate change on indigenous communities in Guyana. As rightly said, climate change is not something that is being new to us. As growing up as an indigenous child in the Pomeroon River, which is region number 2, the small village called Kabukaburi, it's not something that in the English version, very new. It's something that we have grown to understand, probably in our own language. Thank you. This afternoon, my presentation as I go through on the subject. But before I go further, I'd just like to share, based upon the recollection and the information that was shared this morning with the presenters. And as I remembered as a child, the word shame. It came to mind because I was a Lokono Arawak child, which I really never took notice of growing up, until the day I arrived in the city, where you were being told you were something else. And it was not used in the rightly form, but at the same time, you wanted another part, as my mother taught me, another part of education. And I recognize there that we have to educate those of who make us feel as if we are ashamed of who we are and our identity. So I began my journey as renaming. My mom said, "You don't deserve to be called Grace Roberts. You should be called Sabantu Tukoroho." That's why I was given that name. I will now go into the presentation. As we know, that Guyana is a South American country. We are also the only speaking English country in South America. It has indigenous people that is inhabited in the lands before the European settlement. I think that was told many times, and we've heard that in schools, and we've heard that so many times, but still sometimes it's not rooted deep down in us. We shared a mixture of cultures, diversities in our homeland, Guyana. It's 87.5% of the landmass is covered with tropical rainforests. And I'm so happy that I'm part of that, because I work and I traveled. We prefer to travel by land because you have the freshness of the trees while you travel. You can breathe very well. The majority of the Guyanas forested are found on the lands that are traditionally used or occupied by the indigenous peoples. We have 9 what we call tribal groups or nations, some people prefer to call it. They are the Arawaks, which again, based upon what we've said, we have so many things that we need to research before we have. I still think that there's so many research that has to be completed in terms of our identity. because these are just names that probably was just given to us, and we gladly accept those. Arawak, the Akawayo, the Garifuna, the word Carib, Makushi, Patamono, Wapishana, Waiwai, and the Waraos. There are about 117 villages and 46 satellite communities. With a population about 10%. 14% of the land mass is titled land. When we think about climate change, we have to think very seriously about our traditional cultures and our knowledge that we share and how we share that in terms of our own definition of science as indigenous people. Irokrama has worked with many communities. Those are the 20 communities in the North Rupununi. These are some of the areas that we work with. We brought awareness and policy making, community and institutional support. I have with me a book which was developed that we used for awareness. That is the climate change, which is a role model, that forest, which was developed, and we used that for community awareness and training also. Talking about traditional culture, here we have, if anybody can recognize the farming area, the fish, one of the incense that is now used in many of the Anglican churches and think in the churches, which is called the Hayoa, which I've seen in the Irokrama forest. That is the highway used for our traditional spiritual healing. It's used for many other rituals that has been used not only by the Makushi people, but also by many of, I see my parents use this as what we call bina, for attracting fishes, for attracting the animals in the forest. In terms of capacity building, Irokrama has worked with the 20 communities and also the schools that are in the city. This is bringing awareness to the secondary school students, and I was happy this morning when I saw the school children were here, because they are the forerunners for tomorrow. And if we don't highlight and educate them in our traditional paths and our traditional knowledge, because they have to carry through, because unfortunately for me, I have left only with a name, but really not a language. And that is what we have to use, that is what we have to teach our young people. Irokrama has been doing tremendous work in terms with the Rupununi communities, but then there are those that are in the city that also need the awareness of our traditional culture and heritage. Now, some aspect. We talk about some of the things that can basically happen about climate change, is that our weather patterns can be, our farming can be affected, our agriculture can be affected, our livelihoods can be affected in general, loss of biodiversity, we can have drought, our wildlife can be ruined. Many things that we can outline here that can be affected. Now, how do we deal with such things in terms of grasping and putting a positive, I like to say, vibration towards combating of what are some of the negative things that can possibly happen? The North Rupununi District Development Board has taken this very seriously. So they have developed what we call the Community Measurement Reporting and Verification, which is the CMRV. That has done with work with the Red Plus. We also had the 3 partners, which is Irokrama. In the earliest stages of Irokrama, we had which we call the 3-legged stools. 40 communities or 40 people were hired to execute this program. And even though that we've recognized that the smartphone is something that in the early days can take away. I read something that if you take a picture of you, your spirit will go away. But the smartphone, we have developed to use it very smartly. Using the smartphone to capture our lives, to capture our language, to capture our stories, to capture everything that the elders will not be able to pass on to us in a written word. So the North Rupununi is applauded, and I think that it can be translated to other communities. For instance, I come from the Riverine area, and they have been doing this to upkeep and to hold and to take the responsibility serious in terms of holding on, maintaining our heritage, our culture, and to use it in a much more modernized, as we would say, modernized way of highlighting of what we have and what we have left. Irokrama is about, as we call it, our navel, our heartbeat. It's the green heart of Guyana. It's about 371 hectares or 1 million acres of land reserve. The mission of Irokrama is to promote the conservation and the sustainable and equitable use of tropical rainforests in a manner that will lead to lasting ecological, economical, and social benefits to the people of Guyana and the world in general by understanding, research, training and development, and dissemination of technologies. It's a protected area, but not in the form as one of the elders in one of the communities that we worked at said. I am very fortunate to live within the park because it is where our lives is protected. We can tell the stories of it. We know it better. And Irokrama is also named after a mountain range, and it's about 1 million in height. Now, how do we go about taking our responsibility in terms of how do we monitor? And what do we monitor? Biodiversity, and the list goes on. Weather, traffic, infrastructure, solid waste. We have trained young people who are equipped with the necessary techniques and skills so that they will be able to monitor their own forests, their own communities. And this has been done through working with the NRDDB. Of course, we have come quite a long way. The Irokrama Act was since in 1996. It guarantees and protects the rights and enables access to the use of Irokrama forest by the indigenous peoples. And we have started with like 11 communities. Now we have been extended on with 20 communities. Neighboring the forest, there are customary traditional rights to the forest. So everything that we do, I say Irokrama, it's in working with the communities. That is why my work is very important, because I have to listen to many of the issues, many of the information that is being passed down, histories, and everything that has to be done within the communities. As I mentioned earlier, that we have a partnership with the 20 indigenous communities. Now, how do we also capture our past and our present? Capture our cultures. I did not include it in my presentation, but it's one we call the Cobra Project. The Cobra Project is Darwin Initiative project, which is ongoing, whereby they work with indigenous communities to capture video, storytelling, like the CMRV, so that for our future generation, they will be able to learn and to share that experience. We've also worked in collaboration with what we call the Bina Hill Institute. It's an institute where young indigenous youths from across the region, from region 1 to 10, has been attending this institute, whereby they have one of the cultural aspects, where they're taught traditional language, they're taught natural resources, and how to utilize those within their own communities, and how to transfer that into the other regions that those students came from. And it's not only the Makushi, but it's across Arawak, Caribs, Makushi, from the other regions like the Waiwais, Region 7, which is the Garikunas. So not only the Makushi people benefit from that program, but also across indigenous young people, to build their self-esteem, to build their confidence, and to develop their communities. I think this is a remarkable experience, because this is going to put a pathway, and I hope that one day this can be translated into many other regions. I'm not quite sure. I've not traveled that much. As I say, I travel over trees most of the time, but not over the seas. So I understand that more than anything else. But I would love to hear from the others, but I know what we have been doing, working with communities and working right now with our schools in the city to understand, and not for our indigenous brothers and sisters to be ashamed of who they are, and to be ashamed of how they eat, what they eat, and why they eat it. Our food is important because it teaches us our heritage and our identity. I will now play a song for you, which was done by the Bina Hill Institute in relation to climate change, and how they capture that in a song. Because we can go on and on and on and talk about it. I will now play that song for you, but before that, I have some information here that I brought of what we have done so far working with the people, the Makushi people of the North Rupununi. As you can see in my presentation before, which we have the climate change and the role of forests, a community manual. So this is what we use. Added to that, again, we have guides on the plants of Irocrama forests, birds of Irocrama, mammals of Irocrama. The guidebook is one of the ways which we used with our young people. We have what we work with the wildlife clubs. They are young people who are out, who are from ages of maybe from 7 until 17 to 20 years old. They study the history of their community. They work with different environmental projects within their communities. And this guide helps them to look at the different species, whether if it's plants, birds, or mammals. At the end of this presentation, I would like to hand this over to the Garifuna people of St. Vincent. Last year, we also worked with the Bina Hill Institute. We have a songbook which is done in both English and in Makushi. I pioneered this, and I felt very proud when we had the launching, even though that I feel sad it should have been Lokono language. But I'm happy at the end that it is Makushi and it's my brothers and my sisters. So this book here also I would leave, and I have audio copies of it, if you like. So these are just some of the things that which we have worked with in combating what we say now in the modern language, climate change. And there's so many other research that we need to do to correct many of the things that was I'm not an English person, so my words can be incorrect at sometimes. But I would fully understand that we need to correct many of those words that is written in English so that it can be used in our own language, so that we can teach our young people the real meaning of our culture and our heritage. I will leave you with this song by the Makushi people. Climate change, it sends a message. So that is the Bina Hill Institute students on climate change. I will leave you to decide, and as you listen to the tune of what they say, will speak volume. Thank you very much for listening. Good afternoon.
I think we should give another round of applause, please. And I must personally say thank you. Is it Sabanto? Yes. Sabanto. I would not attempt to pronounce the other part of the name. Thank you for that presentation on climate change. And it shows that you're alive and well there in Guyana. I must also applaud your efforts using the modern techniques to what I would term cultural preservation, because it's only as you know who you are, it's only as you are identified as an indigenous group can you begin the fight against anything that would affect your community. So thank you once again. Somebody whispered to me that I didn't introduce myself at the beginning, so my apologies for that. I'm Maxwell Charles. Former teacher, diplomat, minister of government, but now I'm at what we call in here it means REDO, the Regional Integration and the Diaspora Unit, where I served as deputy. I must say at this moment, apologize for the absence of our head of the unit, Ambassador Alan Alexander, who is on his way to Guyana with other heads of government, including our own. The unit, we have members here present. In the audience, we have Ms. Joselle John, who is one of our officers there at the regional. Could you put your hand? Give us a wave? Yes. Works at the unit also. And at the receptionist outside, we have Ms. Alana Priddy and Ensaya Johnson. We are again proud to be associated with this conference, because remember, we are regional integration and the diaspora unit. Okay? Okay, I call upon Mrs. Bob again to do some introductions.
Thank you. It is my pleasure now to introduce our next speaker, Chief Irvins Auguste. Mr. Irvins Auguste is the manager of Nature's Indigenous Adventures, Inc., a family-operated community homestay tourism company. With over 40 years' experience, Mr. Auguste has served as a community activist. He served as Kalinago Chief from 1984 to 1994. Chief Auguste earned his certificate in climate change and sustainable development in tourism from the UWI Open Campus in 2019. He holds a certificate in agricultural studies from Mebu Agricultural Training School in Grenada. Chief Auguste is committed to education and the development of scholarships and research, particularly in matters of heritage studies. He regularly attends and participates in scholarly conferences. Also, he serves as representative mentor of the University of Winnipeg's International Indigenous Program in Dominica, and his family hosts that institution's research scholars each year. He also assists researchers and scholars from the Archaeology Department of the University of Leiden. I welcome to the podium Chief Irvins Auguste.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am happy to be here. I'm happy I made it to this trip. I missed one last week to the Leiden University because as nature had it, it was not for me to travel. But I'm happy to be part and parcel of this, and I want to begin by saying thank you to the Garifuna Council and friends and family and all the associate organizations that have made this possible for us to be part of and to participate. So the head table, President, good afternoon. I want to recognize my colleague, Prosper Paris, who is also from Dominica, and he's the cultural guy. Okay, he's the cultural officer, our cultural officer at home. And if I attempt to say Mabrika and it comes out wrong, then I'm in trouble with him because he's a language guy. Okay, so what Mabrika means hello in our language, so Mabrika, Mabrika. Indigenous peoples of the world are really resilient people. And it is from what I know that the indigenous people, or the First Nations, or the pre-Columbians, or however I would wish to refer, have always held Mother Earth close to the heart. And we've always been people to take as much as is required from what is around us. And it was only after the colonization period that we began taking a little bit more than we really require at any particular time. Hence the invention of the refrigerator. So we must put all the extras in the refrigerator. I'm talking climate change. I'm talking how things have changed and how we've taken so much that in a way depletes our environment around us. And as a result of that, so many different things are also happening in our own lifestyle as indigenous peoples. The island of Dominica must not be mistaken with the Dominican Republic. In your case, I think we all know that. When we go internationally, we always have to do a geography lesson. Unfortunately, we are referred to as Dominicans, the Dominican Republic people and the people from the beautiful nature island of Dominica. So we're not confusing it. As you can see on the map, it's a small island, nothing close to Guyana. So when I listen to my sister from Guyana talking, I'm kind of wondering, I should have gone first, because a massive landmass. Okay. And on Dominica, this is our territory. That's our space, you see here. It's approximately 8 kilometers squared, or 5.7 square miles, I think. And we have only 8 villages. So we are tiny. Okay, 8 villages with a population of 3,500 people. And we do have our own issues too, but we band together, we stand together, and as time has evolved, I think we now have a government that takes a little more care, listen to us more. We're very happy to say that. So you'll see as we go along a little bit, what I mean. Climate change, that's the effect. 2017, Hurricane Maria gave us this visit. And what you see here is a couple of days after the hurricane. Okay, you can see the damages of the house and you can see the mountains, how bare they become. As a result of that, it means that a lot of our trees, coconuts, other permanent trees that persons would have planted, fruits, grapefruits, oranges, it means all that got destroyed as a result of this heavy impact of the hurricane as a result of climate change. We in the indigenous community would have suffered even more than other communities on the island. Simply because the houses that we build as indigenous peoples are not as solid structures, solid structures as other communities. And there's one reason for that. It's not because we don't want to build solid houses, but it's because we are faced with the challenges, as I speak, of not having the kind of collateral that other persons on the islands have. So we cannot go to the bank and present a certificate of title and take $200,000 or $300,000 to build a house. We build our houses based on our income. So if we work for government or any jobs we have, we may take small loans from the credit union little by little and you build. As a result of that, not having solid houses, we suffered a lot as a result when the hurricane hit. And this is a picture that represents just many other homes when the hurricane hit us. We, as I say, we saw the destruction of the forests, and we lost a lot of our crops, and our communities based agriculturally. So persons grow root crops, coconuts, other fruit trees, and coconuts in particular got a very heavy beating out of the hurricane. It means it affected the economy of a lot of people. Because you know what we do with coconuts. The dry coconuts, we make oil with it, or we sell it for making cakes and so on to the bakeries. The young coconuts, the mature coconuts, we use it as jelly water. We would cut them, put them in bottles, or sell them fresh in the market. So the van loads that were coming out from our territory going into the city to sell, that didn't exist again. But there was a change there in that for pretty much a year, persons had to readjust the diet to a lot of thin stuff and rice, something I'm not too happy if when I get home from a long day work and you see rice at home, you wonder what happened to the green bananas, and the breadfruit. But we had to get adjusted to that for a period of time. And recently we've seen anyway, bananas came back early to us, and breadfruit is coming in reasonably. Right, Pastor? Yeah, I'm asking him because he lives in a different part. It's 8 villages, but he lives in a different part. He's by the seaside, I'm in the mountain area. And we got really, really beaten up badly. So we found ourselves, even up to now, juice is Kool-Aid, and what's the other one? Kool-Aid and Turbo, yeah, right, and Turbo, because we still haven't, grapefruit is scarce commodity at home. I do a tourism program myself, my business, and we cannot get grapefruit, so we have to be using Turbo, or you have to be using Carambula. Now I think the only thing that's coming in presently in the fruit season is pineapple, But we have come back very well, Quite apart from that, I must say we have come back pretty much, There are a few more shots again of what it looked like. This is my neighborhood, as a matter of fact. So you can see where I'm standing at my home and looking on the other side to see all these damages. this red roof house, I don't know, it just didn't get touched at all. You know, just didn't get touched. I mean, it was a good thing. A couple of days after, I could go to these people's home, and they had the generator running, and I was able to have a little pork soup with them. You know, so it was something must stay. Yeah? Sight again of the mountains, what it looked like. Okay, but it has changed. Definitely, we had to put on tents. We had to, a few days after, because of all this kind of climate changes and the impact, we had to be squeezing the mattresses that you found hidden down in the bush or in the riverside, and squeeze them up and get plastic and put on it so you could sleep. You know, that was the life we had for a couple of weeks after the hurricane. And the funny thing about these hurricanes is they come in the day or the night, they make all the havoc, and next day, bright sunshine. You know, and here you are wearing a dress on you or anything you can find to put on because everything is wet. You know, I mean, I just don't have the picture of the dress. But you know, our rivers. This is a river here. The rivers get seriously impacted because there are lots of galvanized down there. You know, the wind has thrown a lot of debris in there. So you have stoves, you've got refrigerators, you've got lots of tin. You know, you got electrical wires, all kind of thing in the water. And so you are not, whilst I mean, we're just lucky to drink the water anyway because we have an abundance of water. But at the same time, as time moves on, you know, you go to fish, you get hurt because they are sharp objects in the river. And discussions with the Global Environment Fund recently, they have shown some interest in wanting to support, to do some cleaning of the smaller rivers. You know, there's some big rivers that you may not be able to handle, but that's the kind of result you have when we experience something like a hurricane. The farms. So a lot of people have not returned to their farms, and when persons who have already gone to their farms, because of the kind of access, you got big trees that have fallen across your nice gardens. You have a lot of galvanized. You got pieces of roofs, lots of nails and screws, you know, all over your garden now. And even now it's even worse because they're rotten. You know, so you got rusty material now, going to almost 3 years, and persons have not gone back to their farms and start off because it's difficult. You know, for 25 years you have your farm, you know, blooming, lovely. And then you hear some noise. You know it's coming, but you hear some noise at 8 o'clock in the night, and next morning when you wake up at 6 o'clock, you can't understand where you are. You know, so it has been a challenge for persons to even go back, and there's a certain level of trauma that you go through when natural disasters either hit. You know, so it is our canoes. Why am I seeing a canoe here? I'm not seeing it on the screen. Okay. Our canoes. It's a cultural thing for us. It is something that we've done, we've built over the years. A lot of those trees got damaged during the hurricane. You know, some of them that are not broken, they did not fall down. They got, you know, shook up, and they were just rotten after a while. And that is to compound a situation where already sapping is not properly done. And we were just beginning to, we had this program where we had training for rangers to learn to monitor the forest and that kind of thing. And that comes and it just ticks away a lot. And so now it is beginning, reinventing the wheel, talking to organizations again, and seeing how we can support ourselves to get back into a position to make our livelihood not just as it was, but better. You know, because there are lots of things we can learn in the process. Okay, crafts suffered. We have young people like this who have interest in making their crafts. The craft materials got destroyed. A number of areas, we call it the La Umarid, and different areas in the forest where it just got covered completely and went out. So all these are projects we have to go back and find plans and to encourage people to move back into craft. Now, craft is important to us. In Dominica, it's very important in many different ways. One, it brings in money too. But what we have found out with tourism coming into our parts, our indigenous communities, they buy crafts. And because they buy crafts, you find younger people getting interested in making crafts too, because it's a form of income. So in the absence of that balance of having tourism there, it means that the elders would be the only ones making crafts and young people not bothered about it because, we can spend more time surfing. I have this picture to show you because this stood up to a Category 5 hurricane. So I purposely took it. Yeah, I don't know how old it is. 40 years, possibly. That's the old post office in Atkinson. Okay. Yeah, it stood up. And there's another one, which I really didn't get a chance to go take the picture. But when I went there, I just looked at the house and I couldn't figure out how this house fits to a Category 5. Answers to that: traditional style, traditional little design. I mean, as an old house, a real old house, and it stood up. And we understand that it's because of the way that our builders before built was not using nails, but in the roofs they would put this wood together like this, and they send a wooden peg through it. And those houses stood up to Category 5. Okay, compared to other modern houses that just did not survive it. This one over there, newly built. People came from England and met the family and built this house, and you can see how it is now. It's still like that. I took it just 2 days ago. So it is. It speaks to us about, when we talk of climate change, what we have done ourselves, and have we done the right things? Were we doing the right things? And why should we probably move on to do what we think is new? But we have a lot of hope. As I said, we have a government that is very friendly to us, very helpful. And this is going to be the result. That's what you're looking at. 20 houses have been handed over already. Quite a few more is being built. The EU is going to give us 50 houses, a little bigger than those, fully solar. Okay, so we're backed up by electricity, hot water system. They're going to be state-of-the-art houses. The World Bank is contributing at pretty much another 50 houses, helping individuals to build the houses. So this, which you look at now on the screen, is 10 houses, out of which I think just about 6 people have moved in, but they've already handed all the houses. Good. And you look closely, you can see it has street lights. That little community got street lights. And you know what? If it doesn't have diesel, it doesn't matter. Because this is solar, and you can see the one with the fan. So it's wind and solar, street lights. So this is hope, and as I said, the government is working well. I had the opportunity to ride with him together today, coming across here to Barbados on his way to Guyana, and we had quite a good chat again as to the way forward with what is being done. So in one way we can say that. Probably the climate change and the hurricane didn't do us too bad. Because here we are, persons receiving those houses, this is in the cost of $180,000 to $200,000, and it is completely concrete. The roof and everything is concrete, so these are resilient houses they're putting up. Good. And giving it to families as a gift. Right? No money, nothing to pay for it. Good. The way forward, we see people again putting up some of the dashin. You know dashin, right? Good. So you can see some of the dashin plantations coming back up there. But with climate change, we have to choose, we have to select where we plant because the weather is hot. So sometimes depends on where you plant the dashin, and a hot spell passes on it. You might just eat a little leaf, no food. So in that sense, it gives another challenge because persons may want to plant the dashin in water areas, and those water areas could be water catchment areas. And so tribal council and us have to come in and to work our way through as to how and what is best to practice, where people can farm and should not farm. That's difficult because, economy. But one of the things that I think is going to help us is not necessarily having a bank, but one of the things that is going to help us to be able to individually, as communities of indigenous nations, do things for ourselves is to have ready credit. And credit have been a challenge to our communities, as I said, because small businesses suffer. Making our own private houses have been a challenge. And even regardless of the fact that the government is going to come in and give us probably 1,000 or 5,000 houses, there are individuals who always want to do something of their own. You want to feel that level of independence to do something of your own. And so we would be able to get some credit is going to help. One of the good programs that is beginning next week is that we are bringing on board what we call Farm Hands. And Farm Hands is a program, part of a program that I manage for the government under the National Employment Program, which I think you have in St. Vincent too. And that is, I'm happy to know that I've finally got my new minister to agree with me, that instead of giving one or two farmers persons to work in their farm, and the government is paying them to do that, it is better to have a team or teams of laborers who can assist farmers, and that we have a list makeup of persons who need that help, and you can move the teams to different people. I believe it increases productivity, and more people can benefit from it. And now the green light is on, so I expect Tuesday that we're going to have the first set of people beginning to move. So it means that the farmers who have not been able to go back to their respective holdings will now have that encouragement of labor to go back and begin farming again. And hence, credit might be less because you need credit for farming, but if you can farm, you can make enough money to do something else too. Okay, so that is pretty much what I want to contribute with you. And thank you very much for listening to me. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you very much. He requested that if you have any questions, we could take one or two at the end. Okay. Thank you very much once again. And we see that climate change affects so many things in the indigenous societies: housing, agriculture, water supply, and what have you. Okay? Introduction of the next speaker.
Mr. Andrew Castillo holds a BA in economics and an MBA in international business. He was the president of the National Garifuna Council, the Hopkins branch, in 2017. He is currently still that president, where he has oversight of the cultural activities regarding Garifuna people in the village. He's a board member of the national branch of the National Garifuna Council, and he also participates in the education of the local Garifuna and the visitors regarding history and culture of the Garifuna people. He's a guest lecturer at the University of Belize, and he attends and represents the Garifuna people at different meetings, different organizations and institutions. Mr. Castillo is also the coordinator of the Hopkins Fishermen Association, where he represents fishermen locally and internationally, and he conducts lectures on the fishing industry to students, and also he represents the fishermen on the Southwater Cape Marine Reserve Committee. He's also a member of the Battle of the Drums Secretariat, where Its duties include conducting cultural activities of Garifuna people, formulating policies that involve educating the general public on the Garifuna culture, and he also assists in the Battle of the Drums on weekends. He's also a board member of the Southern Environmental Association, where his duties include attending meetings, reviewing papers, and making policies that are to be enforced by the staff. I welcome to the podium Mr. Andrew Castillo.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. First, I'd like to say that yesterday was the culmination of a 223-year journey for me. My first time to St. Vincent. So when I got off the plane, I told myself, welcome home, Mick. I told myself that. By the way, Chief Irvin, I'm moving to Dominica, because those houses look good. So I will have a discussion with you all today about climate change and the Garifuna people in Belize country. There are a number of studies that have been done showing that climate change has had an effect and will continue to have an effect on indigenous communities throughout the world. And immediate action must be taken to mitigate these effects. And these devastating effects have been compounded by marginalization, exploitation by foreign entities, societal insensitivity, political interference, the lack of expertise within, lack of resources, continued deforestation, and other different issues. And we can witness that by what is taking place in the Amazon, in Bolivia, Brazil, United States, Canada, Australia, many other countries. So these issues are also relevant to us in Belize country. We have 6 Garifuna communities in Belize. And these are namely Dangriga, Hopkins, St. Bite, Barranco, Punta Gorda, and I think I missed one. Georgetown. Now, all of these communities are to the south of Belize, on the Caribbean coast, except for Georgetown. My belief is that the majority of us stayed on the coast because after the devastation of the hurricane, we were encouraged to move inland, away from the coast. But we stayed to the coast because we are accustomed to the sea. And it is convenient for us because just immediately west of us, we have our lands that we can farm and utilize nature, right? As typical of indigenous peoples, the Garifuna people have a really close relationship with the environment. And we are dependent on the resources that it affords us, and thereby makes us immediately vulnerable to the effects of climate change. And this is recognized by the United Nations ILO Convention on Indigenous and Tribal Peoples, 1989, number 169. And as I mentioned earlier, the Garifuna communities in Belize have all been affected by climate change issues with regard to their economic activities, cultural practices, both marine and terrestrial. And we are currently active in seeking solutions as possible ways of mitigation. As you all know, recently we had a tremendous sargassum flow in the Caribbean. We I assume, were all affected by it, right? This was also devastating to us in our communities, and I choose to talk about that first because we are all familiar with it. Like like yourselves, the Garifuna communities in Belize were devastated by this floating mass of weed. Now, there is uncertainty regarding the origin of this scourge, because some are saying that it comes from the Sargasso Sea in the Atlantic, while others are saying that it comes from off the coast of South America because of the runoffs into the ocean by deforestation in Brazil. Right? In talking to the elders in the various coastal communities in Belize, they state that they have never seen this flow in their lifetime. And I'm one of those elders. You all wouldn't believe that, but I'm one of those elders. I'm one of the elders. Yeah, indeed, in my lifetime, I have never seen a flow of seaweed like that. Never. And I assume that us here in the Caribbean would also say the same thing. And this also was a health hazard because there was an increase in respiratory complaints in our communities because of these stinking, this rotting mass of seaweed. One of the things that we would do, which is also relevant to our tourist industry, is we would take a swim in the sea, but because of this mass, we would not do that. This Sargasso flow also had a very serious effect on the fishing industry, and of course the tourism industry and the utility of the beaches. The ability of our Garifuna tour guides and fishers to earn income was curtailed, so their livelihood was adversely affected, and by extension the local economies. Our fishers used outboard motors to get to the fishing grounds, and this weed would get entangled in these motors, rendering them inoperable and have to need repair. And this would definitely result in a loss of earnings because once that machine is down, you can't go fish. That's a whole day of earnings that one would lose. And this is devastating more so because this flow of seaweed was really high during the tourist season. Our tourist season lasts from around November, end of October, early November until April. And this mass of seaweed, definitely killed our ability to make some earnings. So what we did was conduct local cleanup projects, and partly funded by government, but also we volunteered in our local communities. So thereby earning some income and serve our community at the same time. Others use it as landfill, while others claim that it was good fertilizer. But there was also a number of us who decided that they would not use it because this flow of seaweed have some chemicals in there that probably may not make it good for human consumption. All right? Now, personally, I have not seen those studies as of yet, but the little science that I learned in school, kind of makes me comfortable with not wanting to use it as a fertilizer. Some of us, to clean up, we would burn this seaweed, but of course that is also a cause for complaint for respiratory purposes and that kind of stuff. So many of us, we buried it. And in this flow of seaweed, there was also a suggestion that there's an introduction of new species into our fishing grounds. And by logic, one would think that this is the case because this mass can sustain new species from the point of origin, let's say from South America, all the way up to Belize. All right? And an example of this, right? Somebody took it away from me. Lionfish, indeed. And lionfish has been devastating on the Belizean fishing industry because, again, we all know it is voracious. It eats literally any and everything. And there's also reason to suggest that this flow of seaweed has a negative effect on the reef because there's a stagnant mass of this weed that will stay on the reef, and the reef is a very sensitive ecosystem, right? And so a stinking mass that will leach chemicals and that kind of stuff will affect that ecosystem and throw it off balance. And that is important to Belize, not only for the fishing industry itself, but also for tourism purposes, because I think we all know that Belize has the second largest barrier reef in the world, right? If somebody here didn't know that, raise your hands for me, please. No, you don't have to. You don't have to. Just kidding. So like I said, the reef is a breeding ground for fish and also a tourist attraction. So having this mass will affect the fisher folk and the tour guides that we have, and so they are unable to earn. So this results in the reduction in the catch that our fisher folks can make, and fish is very important to us as Garifuna people. So our source of protein would have to be altered because there's less fish that is being caught. So in addition to all of this, the climate change issues has also made life difficult for the fishers in the Garifuna communities, as there has also been a reduction in the population of some of the species that they exploit for not only home use, but for economic benefit. Again, here comes the lionfish. As a result of this reduction in population, the policies enacted by the government has reduced the species that can be exploited, reduced the fishing grounds that can be operated on, and so it is getting more difficult to get to grounds that you can exploit. This has made it more expensive to earn a living as a fisher, and it has had an impact on the Garifuna people as they have to seek different sources of proteins and income streams. In the past, fish, which is considered a healthier protein, was had on a daily basis in our communities. And other sources like chicken, beef, and pork was a rare occasion. So this reversal has had an effect on the increasing prevalence of chronic diseases as the diet of the Garifuna people has changed to adapt to this lack of protein source. At least the one that we prefer. This has made the traditional source of protein more expensive, as one has to go further to get the product, again, because of the government policies. Initially, like in our communities, we can use a small little boat, very small, a one-man boat, paddle out there, get some fish, come back home, and everybody is happy. Now that is no longer the case, because we have to go further. We have to buy a motorboat to go and get this fish. The overheads to make these fishing expeditions get a little more expensive, so the price of fish increases, and so that has a staggering effect. All right? So, government policies that have been enacted has resulted in a loss of traditional land. This loss of traditional land has reduced the lands that are available for farming, forcing the Garifuna people to buy products from merchants who would charge higher prices because they're doing this for profit than the traditional farmers. This loss of land has also affected the way how traditional healers gather the medicinal resources that they utilize to cure the various afflictions in the indigenous population. In this case, indigenous, I'm referring to now as the Garifuna people. These healers have to forage further from the communities, and they even have had to get permission from the government to harvest the natural resources that they would need within our traditional lands. For example, in one of our traditional spiritual practices, there is a need to use marine life. But this marine life that we need to use, we have been banned by government from utilizing them. And I'm talking about turtles. If you go to Belize, turtles are endangered species. We use that in our traditional cultural practices, but we are banned from using it. Another example is that of making of drums. And I think you were alluding to that yesterday. The Garifuna drum maker relies solely on the forest to gather the materials to make these drums. There's literally nothing artificial on a true cultural Garifuna drum. For example, we gather hardwoods for the base. We get vine from the forest to tighten the skin. The skin is an animal, deer or antelope, that we use for cover. But to get this done has been made difficult because of the deforestation that is taking place. We have to forage further. Then government regulations say you can't do this, you can't do that. So our lives are getting a little more difficult. So what that does is reduce our ability to practice our cultural practices. In Belize, as a part of the deforestation, in Belize we have a significant mangrove forest. And these provide a variety of benefits and resources to the Garifuna communities. The Garifuna people are traditionally aware of the importance of mangrove forests, and so they are very careful in utilizing them. The Garifuna people use mangroves also as a medicinal resource because the bark of the red mangrove is used as a tea. It has some soothing purposes, so we use it. Mangroves are a barrier to prevent erosion on the coastline because of the root system and the density of the forest. So in the Garifuna communities, we frown upon destroying mangrove forests. They also provide a nursery for young marine life, which in turn sustains the marine life, the fish stock that we have out in the sea. However, developers, capitalists, who are not familiar with the importance of these forests or don't care, continue to clear these forests to the detriment of our beaches and our fish stock. But government policies tolerate that. These mangrove forests were also affected by this seaweed, as the seaweed would rot on the roots of these mangroves, and the mangroves rot, and thereby, the whole ecosystems were affected. So the Garifuna people currently are in communication with the government to advise them of this and see how they can enact policies or take actions that would mitigate these effects of climate change. I will continue to reiterate that Garifuna people are quite vulnerable to any climate change because of the dependency on the environment and its resources for survival. Recently, there was an erosion of beaches in the various coastal communities, which had an impact on the lives and the livelihood of the various residents. There has been a significant loss of landmass in almost all coastal communities of Belize, including our Garifuna communities. The only one that has not been affected adversely by this erosion is Punta Gorda, as its course is really rocky, and they are in a higher elevation than that of the other Garifuna communities. All the other communities were affected, other than Georgetown, because Georgetown is inland. It is not on the coast. For example, in Hopkins, where I'm from, and where Dr. Gwen is from, there was a recent loss of a few feet of beachfront, white clean sand. The best beaches in the country of Belize, in Hopkins. But our elders, when we have discussions with elders regarding the beaches, you learn how significant the loss of landmass has been, because in their lifetime, these people are probably in the early 80s. They have lost over 200 yards of beach, right? Or 200 yards of beach? About 200 yards of beach in their lifetime. You know? So it has been very devastating. In addition to other issues, the ability to earn from tourism has been affected, of course. Again, one of the attractions that we have is a whale shark. Whale shark is a huge, probably the biggest shark in the world, that comes by when they're spawning in Belize. But because of climate change, like, there's less sightings of the whale shark. So that reduces our earnings from the tourist sector. What our local tour guides and local NGOs are saying is that these whale sharks are now going deeper in the waters, and because the waters may be getting warmer. And again, this is one of the effects of climate change. Now, this is a concern for not only the Garifuna communities, but also the local NGOs, because this change in natural order needs to be researched. So currently, we have a number of Garifuna people who are assisting the NGOs in doing this research. So that's one way of mitigation. In the past, the weather patterns were fairly predictable, and as such, there was a semblance of a regular routine that made life less complicated for us as Garifuna. This current crisis has changed all of that, because you have intense rain for a short while, and this results in flash flooding, affecting our crop cycle, the water systems that we are dependent on. The shifting rainy season also affects the way how we plant our crops. And so we have had to alter our planting and the crops that we plant to adjust. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we had a drought recently, which was last year, and it had a direct effect on us. It is predicted that this year, the drought will be a little more intense. In other words, earlier and longer. Climate change at its best. But we have, there's currently an organization called the Wachari Organic Agricultural Association, which is currently developing some solutions that will mitigate the effects of this climate crisis. So we are depending on them to assist us in doing this. They are recruiting as many Garifuna farmers as possible to seek alternative crops to plant at various times that may alleviate this issue. An example of like a crop that we normally didn't utilize was a vanilla plant. Common in Belize, but the Garifuna communities were not utilizing it as a cash crop or for economic purposes. So that is one of the research that Wachari is doing currently. They're also encouraging the Garifuna people to pursue home gardening to mitigate the effect of this climate change crisis. So we can plant our staples, for example, cassava, other tubers at home, ginger, to improve food security. This is basically a return back to the way the ancestors used to live. All right? The United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change Conference of the Parties, COP16 in Cancun 2010, decided to encourage developing countries to contribute to reducing greenhouse gas emissions in the forest sector by undertaking REDD+ activities, similar to what your communities are doing. Belize has undertaken that, and Garifuna people are participating in that project. This project is currently being led by the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries, Forestry and Environment through the National Climate Change Office. As I said earlier, the Garifuna people rely on nature for their daily existence, and as such consider themselves respectful of nature. And knowledge is passed on through generations from the elders to the younger, which encourages them to use the forest or use nature in a sustainable manner. They use it to supplement nutrition needs, gather food, hunt animals, gather medicinal plants, resources to support spiritual practices. The Garifuna communities are engaging and will continue to engage the government to share their traditional knowledge to mitigate the effects of climate change. Now, there has been increasing effort to engage the government in dialogue regarding the loss of land. Currently, the National Garifuna Council is in discussion with the government of Belize. Actually, we are undertaking a project to demarcate our lands so that we can be able to utilize the traditional lands that the Garifuna people have used in the past. So, like I said earlier, we're trying to engage the government in a dialogue regarding the use of the traditional knowledge to combat climate change. Discussion about the various marine species, what can be done to mitigate the effects of climate change and the fish stock. The Garifuna fishers, traditional fishers, are familiar with the fishing grounds and are in a better position to engage the government rather than some bureaucrat who sits in some office or some expert from abroad who has no knowledge about what is really taking place on the ground in Belize country. So our Garifuna people have put forward some recommendations to the government regarding the mitigation of climate change. And these suggestions or recommendations have been presented in various fora. Replanting of trees, especially hardwoods, those being mahogany, zericote, Santa Maria, cabbage bark, etc. Control deforestation. Stop or reduce clearing of mangrove forests. Strengthening of the Department of Environment. Enforcing existing laws. Meaningful regulation of chemicals in agriculture. Establishing a meaningful water policy. Encourage recycling and better waste management. Enact policies that will reduce carbon footprint, restrain political interference, enforcing existing laws and regulations, utilizing traditional knowledge in formulating laws and regulations, and these recommendations will go further to mitigate the effects of climate change. Not only in the Garifuna communities, but in the country on a whole. While the primary concern is that of Garifuna people, there should be recognition that the engagement of the whole country which they are part of. Lastly, the effects of climate change and all that comes with it has been, again, I repeat, devastating on our communities. The loss of land has left some people landless, and they need to seek economic opportunities elsewhere. Immigration has had a serious effect on our communities because, again, the lack of land. And so the ability to feed their lands forces people to migrate elsewhere, not only within Belize, but abroad. There are two of our Garifuna communities that have been affected significantly, and those being Saint-Bite and Barranco. This has helped to dilute the Garifuna culture as Garinago or Garifuna people adapt to the places that they move to and assimilate that culture where they're residing in. That means the kids that they have or the grandkids move away from the original culture. The good news right now is that there's an awakening whereby Garifuna people living away and abroad are encouraging their kids to return to the ways of the ancestors. And there has been a wave of repatriation back to the country of Belize. So many have come, invested back home, building infrastructure, and again, returning to the old traditional ways. So there is a current urgency in the desire to acquire land back home in Belize, and more so in the communities that they're originally from. The National Garifuna Council, which we are part of, are in the forefront in engaging the government in this acquisition. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Castillo. Again, we see a commonality of presentations here in that climate change is real and it must be fought. We must pay attention to it before it is too late. That's the message we have coming through. Okay, I call on Ms. Bob again.
Thank you. Before I call the next speaker, I would like to make two apologies. We should have had presenting on the same topic, the impact of climate change among Garifuna communities from Honduras, Dr. Dorte Werner. He is an agricultural economist with the World Bank. He's not here with us today. And we should have also had Mr. Starian Alowanai from the Basta of the village of, not even going to try to pronounce that one, Christian Condre, something like that, Suriname. He's not here with us today. However, we do have Miss Harriet, and please forgive me if I'm mispronouncing the word. I'm going to try my best. So Harriet Reedzam Joe Roger, not sure. So we're going to invite her to the podium to make some remarks on the Surinamese indigenous people and the impact of climate change.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Okay. So, I am a member of the village council, and because of that, there is great responsibility in any topics of development of human life. So I thought I should know. I have to know. And I have to let my voice heard. So in that matter, I like to indeed put some remarks. Okay, when I was a child, my father used to go fishing at certain season. That is when it was flooding over the river. And there were certain fishes coming, in fact, on land. So it was easy fishing. And I used to ask him, how come that's happening? So he told me, he taught us, not me alone, but the whole group of children should know. That is transformation of knowledge. There is certain season when this happened, and you have to look at the moon. You have to look at this, and in the evening, it's very nice. You go with your elders and look at the sky. Very interesting. That was not only the transformation of the transfer of knowledge, but it is, in fact, a way of life, our culture, indigenous people culture in my country anyway. So these things stays with me. They stayed with me. And sometimes we, as a young girl, I had to skip school because of nature calling. And he used to tell the teacher, this is life, she is a girl, certain times she may not get in touch with water, body of water, not in the river, not in the forest. So you have to send her the lessons with other children. And nobody could say, no, I cannot, I will not. It's forbidden. Not in my village. Really, not in my village. So when I grew older, the state, in 1957, the state concluded that they will set up a factory to produce paper. And to do that, they needed more than 30,000 hectare land to plant the trees and do the research. And nobody in the land in Suriname had so much land than the indigenous people. So the government comes and say, this is our plan. So village A, B, and C, we will take a piece of land of you, and so forth. And we will, when we finish, you will get your land in return. And my father told the other leaders, this is not good, because the original, the original soil will disturb, but everything will disappear. Trees, medicinal plant, whatever. With that, all the animals, and so forth and so forth. So, but they didn't listen. But with my father, my village, nobody touches a tree. None. None whatsoever. So it stays there, and my home stays just like that. So now, today, I'm old, almost. I'm learning about climate change. And I say to myself, this is not new. It's a very old thing. It is the evolution of life. It's changing. So the terminology of climate change is indeed, it tells you something is changing. But we knew, the elders knew that it's changing. And that's why they held on the knowledge, the traditional knowledge, what they have been taught century for century. And we call that in the Dutch traditionele kennis. And in the English is the same, traditional knowledge. And this is not being recognized officially, because the state, and who is the state? Other people than the indigenous people. Other people using European culture system to come and teach us to live like the European and leave your knowledge aside. What are we saying now? No, we have to be coming home, see who we are, what we are, so we can find ourselves. So in short, traditional knowledge is a way to, not to battle, I don't want to use the word battle, to see how we can bring our lives and nature back into balance. That is what, it's not a battle. Battle is negative. We are here in the world as a human, but the Creator has not created only us. The Creator created water, trees, animals, the sun, the stars. For those things, we do not pay for them. The only thing we need to do is live by the laws. And we cannot say we don't know. We do know. And if we do not accept what we have, if you do not recognize the value of your own life, then you say to the Creator, you know, worthless, I do what I do. Now what you do, and you will get what you get. And that is climate change. So what are we doing? You know, that is not my first conference about climate change. I went to Canada, and there was a battle. There was a group who said, no oil industry in Canada. And there was the other one. Well, if there was no oil, we wouldn't have the money to come over all the way from South America to Canada. That is also true, right? So what do we do? Let us find out what is exactly happening and how we can change our situation into something in balance. And that is to be aware who you are, what you have. And we may not leave everything to the government. And it is not a protest or something against, but this is how we have to look at it. The government has its own policy, but what about our own policy, who we receive from our Creator? That is yourself, your inner self. That is your spirit. That is our spiritual being. We have to live by that. Okay, my country, Suriname, we have, we don't have a law indeed. We are not recognized as people The land are not recognized, but what we've done, we have now a concept law with Parliament, and within that there is a law for our to be recognized as a people, and the land, of course, with everything, our culture, and so forth, and so forth. But the second thing is working with our own people, because money, economy is the other part of our life. My village is one of the 6 villages in the district who are the biggest pineapple producer. Now we have been taught to produce food according to a special system. The economy asks for more. So when you commercialize your product, it's something else too. But my people, they want to be part of all these. I don't know all the names of these phones. They are smart or not. For me, they are not smart. But anyway, I don't have one. I have a yes and no mobile phone, really. But I have also a laptop. You know, these are equipment. But anyway, they want to have money, so. But what we do not do is to go and learn about business. Business doing is not part of our culture, so we don't know that, because our culture does not know money, economy. We have to live, to produce. And what we have produced, the other part is to share. You share, because you do not buy, you do not purchase. It is given. It is given to you. So it is not only for you, it is also for others. That is the world we knew. We knew then. But now we want to commercialize, and that is a very hard business, because you don't have the land. The land is collectively owned by everyone. So if I want to have a business, I have to go and ask the people. We don't know how to do that, because how will you produce a business plan if you do not go by to the one who knows that to teach you? That is a handicap. You see? So all that is also climate change, because that is the evolution in the world. Yesterday is yesterday. You cannot change yesterday, but you have to learn from it. And we don't do that. We want to live today like we want to, but we don't think about the children, the next generation. So that is one thing, economy. And I want to say that conferences like this is very good, that we hear from each other, but we have to do something about and with it. The information here, even though, let's say, only four countries exchange information, when we go back home, let's use that to try to be what we should be, a mother who have to share with the children, with the neighbors, because when you are not home, neighbors look at your children, and you don't pay them. But what you receive, you have to share, because you do not buy, you do not purchase that. Let's go back and see what we can do, please. And so I want to ask everyone, before, let's say maybe 30 years ago, I was always angry on the white man. If you start to listen to people, what the church did with us, what the white man did to us, and then I lost my parents, and I realized I have been taught to write and to read. And I went back to yesterday and I said, well, if the white man didn't come, do whatever they did with my ancestors. Okay, today, so what? No, I know how to write. I know how to read. Now, what about the mistake we made? Okay, so what? What about my children then? You see? So let's use yesterday as an example. We don't know, maybe we cannot measure why it happens. But let's benefit from the exchange of the knowledge of the culture, and let's use our voice, our inner self, what you feel is right, what you think that is right, to tell our government, we respect your policy, yes, but it is discriminatory, so you cannot leave anyone out. We all are human. Let's work together side by side, use the Western science, but let us use our own science, our own knowledge. Let's combine that together. Let's find a way, and there is a way. I know there is a way, and the way is, look at yesterday with your whole conscience, look at what we can do today, and let's make for our children a better world. If we don't do that, indeed, we don't have a future. Because there is a law, there are cosmic laws, that the sun will shine tomorrow. These are cosmic laws. These are the spirituality of life. There is a cosmic law that says your body needs for 90% water. If you don't have that safe water, and you let the policy go where gold mining is taking place and pollute all the rivers, then it is you who are killing yourself and not the government. Really, it's not the government, it's not the white man, it's also not the black man, but it's us who are now here with the experience. This is what, this is what I like to share with you, that the impact is everywhere. At this moment in my village, we have fruits. When the fruits must be ripened at, let's say, January, February, March, and it is ripened November, December, that means it's not good fruit. But these fruit are for the animals. And if the animals eat that before it is good, there is a parasite that is developing within the animal body. And if there is too less water, there is also the parasite going into the fish. So if we do not understand these cosmic laws, let's go back and learn about it. There is an insect. If I have mango tree at home, and I hear a beaver, and the beaver go on the leaf or a branch, and depend on how big the branch is it a small beaver with a small branch, he will cut it down, meaning there is a small dry season coming. But when you see it is a big branch, it's a bigger beaver, it's bigger dry season. So the nature speaks to us. We communicate. But if you say, okay, leave the mango tree, cut it down. You don't have trees next to your home, you will not see this. And you will forget all the communication systems of nature. Because you are part of nature, so it will communicate with you. But you forget everything because we are now in the technology, how do you say that? The knowledge era. So you rely only on whose knowledge? Whose knowledge? Technology, and use is And whose technology is that? Whose knowledge is it? It's the Western world, modern world. And you just throw it in the garbage. Nature sees you and tell us, okay, you don't need my knowledge, then you live by yourself. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Harriet. You've successfully transported me to a time when life was much more simple. And now Suriname is on my bucket list. I really need to visit there. I just want to reiterate and to really bring to the fore, some of the things that you said about sharing with your neighbors and, taking a village to raise a child. Some of the things that we've taken for granted and we've stopped doing. I could have listened to her for the rest of the afternoon. Notwithstanding, we must proceed. And we have our next speaker, who is Miss Yassa Belma. She's an environmentalist, and she's a specialist with over 12 years of experience in environmental sustainability, in planning and management, and she currently works as an environmental analyst in the Sustainable Development Unit in the Ministry of Finance, Economic Planning, Sustainable Development, and Information Technology. Her professional interests include environmental governance, integrated approaches to natural resource management, and small island sustainability. She holds a master's degree in water and environmental management from the University of Bristol in the UK, and she also holds a bachelor's in environmental sciences from the University of the West Indies, Mona campus. She is a native of Bequia and enjoys spending weekends there with her family members, including her dogs. She also enjoys hiking, reading classic literature, and baking cupcakes in her spare time. We welcome Yassa to the podium.
Thank you, Tashika, and good afternoon, everyone. Okay, so I must say that I am learning quite a lot today, as I am the only member of this panel who is not from an indigenous community. As Tashika mentioned, I work in the civil service. In environmental management, we deal with sustainable development policies and planning. And one of the things that we recently completed was the development of our national climate change policy and strategy and action plan, as well as a series of national adaptation plans. So this afternoon, I will be talking about climate change in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and the implications for Garifuna communities. The structure of my presentation is fairly simple. I'll be looking at climate change from a global perspective, and some of it might seem simple or repetitive, but it's important for my argument. And at the global level, I'll just be talking basically about what is climate change, who or what is responsible, and looking a bit at the issue of climate justice. Then I look at the national level, what are the climate projections for St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the expected impacts and consequences of these impacts, what have we observed to be happening already, and what are some of the responses that we have taken nationally from the government perspective to addressing these issues. Then lastly, I'll be looking at local Garifuna communities. What are the factors affecting their vulnerability? I'll speak specifically about what's happening in Sandy Bay in relation to coastal erosion. And lastly, I'll talk a bit about the adaptive capacities of Garifuna communities in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and some conclusions in terms of how we should go forward. So what is climate change? We've been talking about it all afternoon, I'm sure everybody can tell me. But basically, it is a significant change in the measures of climate lasting for an extended period of time. So it's over about 30 years or so. And you would notice major changes in variables such as temperature, rainfall, wind patterns, and so on. So it's not weather, which changes from day to day. It's not just something we can, based on our experiences at the day-to-day level, but it's over a very long period of time. And because of this, you have people saying, well, climate change is a natural phenomenon. But that is not what we're talking about. We're talking about anthropogenic change. And this is change that is a result of human activities. It's attributed directly or indirectly to these activities, which is the release of greenhouse gases, which are produced through a variety of activities, most commonly combustion. So we need fuel in order to generate electricity and other very important uses. And it's very difficult to do anything in this world without having fossil fuels. So historically, developed countries such as the United States, Europe, and more so now China, have emitted the majority of the greenhouse gases which are responsible for global warming and climate change. And the argument that is taking place at the international level in terms of climate justice is based on the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capacities. And the argument is basically framed at this high level where we are talking about the fact that small islands and developing states which have not contributed very much to creating the problem are bearing the brunt of the impacts. And so there's a call for justice from various fronts. And small island developing states, including St. Vincent, are very active in high-level political discussions on these issues. For instance, in the 1.5 to Stay Alive campaign, that was very successful during the Paris Climate Conference, was led by small island states, particularly the Caribbean. Within these fora, such as the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, you also have the presence of indigenous people groups which want to get their voices heard and their issues addressed. So let's look at the national level. So it's all well that we talk about these things at the national level, but I wanted to highlight earlier that Smith and Riney, Dr. Smith, Jasmine Smith, is a Vincentian researcher at the University of the West Indies who did her PhD research on the impact of climate change on Garifuna communities in St. Vincent. And one of the things that she said in a 2015 paper is that there's a need to downscale the current climate justice discourse to take into consideration the distributional effects of climate change on the most vulnerable at the subnational level, including on indigenous peoples like the Garifuna. And that's why conferences such as this one and these types of sessions are very important for us to understand what is happening at the ground level and how is it affecting different groups in different ways. So how is climate change going to affect St. Vincent and the Grenadines? What do the projections say? Well, climate models project that there will be an increase in average temperature, air temperature, reduced annual rainfall, increased sea surface temperatures, potential for an increase in the intensity of tropical storms and hurricanes, sea level rise of 0.5 to 0.6 meters per year by the year 2100 across the insular Caribbean, and ocean acidification, which will continue as carbon dioxide is absorbed into the ocean, which then affects the calcification of shellfish and the formation of coral reefs. The socioeconomic impacts of these are multiple and varied. But basically, you can expect to see an increase in food prices, threatened livelihoods, loss of incomes, impacts on food security, and some of the impacts, I think, were very well demonstrated by Chief Irvins of Dominica, where we really got to understand from his first-hand experience of what it was like to go through a tropical, a Category 5 hurricane. It's something that I think is hard for us to imagine unless we hear it from people themselves. But these sorts of really life-changing losses are going to become more commonplace, and something that we need to prepare for and adapt in order to be able to cope and to be more resilient. Coastal erosion and flooding is another major issue that we need to pay attention to. The loss of coastal vegetation, the loss of coastal infrastructure, decline in reef-based fisheries, all of that is going to affect our tourism and fishing sectors. Some of the observed impacts, I'm sorry this is so small, but more than 15 major weather events. We've had more than 15 such events since 2001. We've had loss and damage amounting to more than $1 billion US dollars. It's estimated that 18 to 30 meters of beach has been lost in the last 10 years. There's unpredictable rainfall disrupting our water supplies. Many people are now hearing that CWSA may need to ration supplies because of an ongoing drought, and it's something we have to prepare for. We need to change the way that we consume precious resources such as water. We have unpredictable and heavy rainfall leading to runoff and landslides that strip the topsoil, and once the topsoil is lost, that makes agriculture production extremely difficult, if not impossible. Storms and floods, we have, the list goes on, you all know it. These are some pictures of the damage caused by previous events. What makes us vulnerable? Our small size, our location, our topography, fragile economy, population, settlement patterns, and very importantly, the degradation of our natural resources. We cannot talk about climate change in a vacuum. It's also influenced by the choices we make, like our colleagues mentioned about, deforestation and these sorts of decisions that we make are not just decisions that are taken by politicians, but they are decisions that we choose to accept or that we drive because of our concerns. One is you can mitigate, which is about reducing our emission of greenhouse gases, but because in small island developing states we don't emit that much, we tend to focus on adaptation. And that is strengthening our human and natural systems to withstand the effects of climate change. So some of the recent responses that we have been taking at the state level, they have been basically on two fronts. We look at governance, policy, and planning. And under that already mentioned that Cabinet has recently adopted a national climate change policy and national adaptation plan. We are also introducing various pieces of legislation, such as the introduction of a ban on styrofoam and certain single-use plastics. And whilst it might be difficult to see the relation between that and climate change, these things exacerbate flooding. by choking drains. And so if we get rid of some of these sources of solid waste, it would improve our resilience somewhat. Also, we are implementing a phase-out of coastal sand mining. Beaches are important buffers for coastal flooding, and so it's important for us to not make it worse by stripping the beaches. Also, we're pursuing varied approaches to diversifying the national energy mix, and that's more in terms of mitigation. And a draft plan has been developed for addressing emissions from the transport sector in our nationally appropriate mitigation action for the transport sector. On-the-ground interventions include the construction of coastal and river defenses throughout the country, slope stabilization works in many communities to address the issue of water insecurity. We have, the government has installed a desalination plant in Beckway and looking at expanding that. Rainwater harvesting has also been an important strategy where such systems have been installed on emergency shelters, and also in particular communities, households have been given rainwater harvesting systems under a variety of projects. There's also satellite warehouses that are being constructed throughout the country so that in the case of an emergency, there's distributed network of supplies that can be easily deployed. Also investments in climate smart agriculture, public education, awareness and training. Admittedly, I don't think there is enough of this, but this has been going on and needs to be ramped up even more. And also there has been watershed rehabilitation through the forestry department. So these are just some pictures of some of the initiatives I spoke about. And now we will look at climate change within the context of local Garifuna communities. Now, this, I must confess, is not something that I know a lot about, since there has not been a lot of research on the interconnection between these two issues. I therefore draw heavily on Jasmine Smith's work, who I mentioned earlier. Dr. Smith makes this observation in one of her papers. She says, while St. Vincent and the Grenadines is recognized as the homeland of the Garifuna culture, much of the original culture of the Garifuna of St. Vincent has disappeared. Attempts to re-establish Garifuna culture within St. Vincent have been unsuccessful and ineffective. People may disagree, but one of the most significant connections to cultural identity going back to the 1700s was between the Garifuna people and land. And this, I think, is very important considering the effects of climate change on this link. Factors affecting vulnerability. So vulnerability to climate change, to climate-induced threats is not solely a function of a person or group's physical exposure to hazards or the nature of the hazards themselves, but also the social and human conditions of the exposed population. Vulnerability to negative impacts, it affects different people in different ways, and climate change tends to exacerbate pre-existing and historically entrenched vulnerabilities. And we know what some of those historically entrenched vulnerabilities are. We have been discussing them today. The Garifuna communities in St. Vincent, with the exception of Greg's, are found in coastal communities to the north of the island of St. Vincent. These communities are very remote. Farming is the main livelihood activity in these communities, and fishing is also important. These communities, unfortunately, are among the poorest in the nation. Smith found that a majority of the 55 farmers that she interviewed as part of her research lived within households that earn less than $500 monthly from their economic activities. And you go to the supermarket, $500 can't really take you that far. So that's a real serious condition. High rates of unemployment, low levels of educational attainment are also characteristic of these communities. Garifuna communities in St. Vincent exist in a context of centuries of political and economic marginalization, which create a plethora of structural impediments to their resilience. Nonetheless, these researchers found that traditional knowledge and strong family and communal ties, which create social capital, act as an important source of adaptive capacity. And we heard about some of this in Guyana and in Suriname, where the speaker spoke about the importance of being neighborly and lending a hand, but we'll get back to that. Sandy Bay is an area where there has been significant loss of land to sea, severing that connection between Garifuna and land. Sandy Bay is located in the northeast of St. Vincent and is exposed to two operational wave regimes. The day-to-day conditions caused by the northeast trade winds and seasonal winter swells associated with tropical waves. Oops. Anyway, I can't see my notes, but basically there is quite a lot of erosion taking place in this location, and you can see how low-lying this community is. So there have been several studies undertaken to understand the sources of erosion and exactly what is going on in order to identify a solution to this problem. And what these studies have revealed is that there are consistently high swells ranging between 1 meter and 2 meters in the area. 1 in 10 swells are over 2 meters. During Hurricane Ivan, waves reach heights of up to 5 meters. And certain points along the shoreline have retreated up to 30 meters in 9 years, indicative of an average erosion rate of 3 meters every year. So what are the impacts of these trends? Sandy Bay has experienced loss of housing, livelihood, and recreational space as a result of storm damage over the years. The Windward Highway is also at risk, and this is critical as it is the main thoroughfare and the only road into and out of these communities. There's also very little recreational space for the community, since an area that was once used as a playground was lost due to coastal inundation and acute erosion caused by storm surges associated with past storm events, including Hurricane Allen in 1980. So the planned response, like I mentioned, extensive studies have thus far been conducted to understand the erosional process in this area. Studies reveal that ecosystem-based approaches are not appropriate. Many times if you want to address a problem in the environment, it's not best to just try to address it using engineered solutions. You should see as much as possible how you can restore natural ecosystems. But in this case, it's not possible given the aggressive wave environment in the area that would prevent the establishment of any coastal vegetation. So a sea defense is planned for Trenchtown in Sandy Bay, and that sea defense consists of, it will be 700 meters of boulder revetments in total, and it will be done in 2 phases, and the first phase of 60 meters of revetments and the recreational area will be constructed. But This is just an example of the science and the engineering response, but what about the adaptive strategies employed by the Garifuna communities themselves? Like I mentioned, there has not been a lot of research, but Smith and Barker found that the remoteness of these communities in some cases has actually resulted in stronger interdependence among villagers. Cultural practices such as the use of informal community labor networks, referred to as swap labor or hand go, hand come, serves as an effective coping mechanism among farmers in these areas. Knowledge of traditional farming methods, example intercropping, lunar phase farming, fallowing, or choosing more drought-resistant crops, helps them to cope with climatic variability. Nonetheless, these practices are insufficient to overcome the existential threats posed by climate change, and greater efforts are needed to ensure that more financial and technical resources are channeled to these vulnerable communities. So to conclude, my thoughts are that complementary action is needed at all scales in order to address current and future impacts of climate change on the Garifuna communities. Making Garifuna voices heard at international conferences, especially UN negotiations within the context mostly of the UN FCCC, the Framework Convention on Climate Change, is one such way of bringing attention to these issues and making necessary linkages to broader climate change discourses on climate change. Previous speakers mentioned participating in REDD+, and REDD+ is a mechanism under the Climate Change Convention where it recognizes the value of conservation of forested areas, and is a mechanism where the keepers of these forests are able to generate resources for their development and sustainable livelihoods through participating in these activities that they would generally participate in anyway. So this is an area that we can consider that we haven't done as yet in St. Vincent. Obviously, we have much less forest than you do in South America and Central America, but it's still important to preserve what we do have. At the national level, the government's climate resilience agenda must support and complement its broader development programs in the areas of education, agricultural development, land reform, and housing. These programs play an important role in lifting standards of living and removing some of the entrenched economic vulnerabilities. And lastly, at the community level, we need to better understand these issues through research, for instance, by applying an intersectionality lens, because it's not just Garifuna affected by climate change, but how are women Garifuna people affected, and the people who are disabled and Garifuna. These different issues need to be better understood and broken down because societies are not homogeneous. And we need to find ways of preserving the Garifuna's cultural heritage, applying relevant traditional knowledge and supporting those organic, bottom-up grassroots actions that are already at play in Garifuna communities. So with that, I just want to say thank you once again for inviting us to participate, and all the best for the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Asa. And that was a comprehensive view of the situation in St. Vincent. And we thank you very much. That has brought us to the end of the presentations. And as requested, we don't know if you have any questions or any comments as we end up our session here today. After which we might have some housekeeping matters with yes.
Not a question, I just reading something here which I just mentioned before. I'm reading something here that says today is the 223rd anniversary of the forceful deportation of a Britain of Garifuna people from SBD. On March 11, 1797, 2,248 black Garifunas were loaded onto 8 ships to set off across the Caribbean Sea. Some 2,206 survived the journey and landed in water, the islands Honduras. Student members. I think Dr. spoke about this earlier, the word deportation. Yeah. Well, I'm reading this. No banish. On this topic.
Yes.
Student Remembrance Day.
Okay.
There's an activity, normally people are busy, and service today, and there's an activity in the national activity. And then we ask them to celebrate in April, the tribal Silver.
Thank you for bringing that quotation and reminding us of where we began and where we are today. Very significant indeed, because remember, these were people from this country, and they were banished, as it were, to Central America, to Rotan, and from there they went to other countries like Honduras, Guatemala, and so on. So, yeah, this is why we have, well, we are, you left your people here, and you're simply you're our cousins. And I think I could identify with this because I recently did a DNA. And I have relatives popping up in Honduras, Belize, and so on, because I'm Garifuna too, you know. Yes, I am. My grandparents came from the Carib country, and they settled in Bottom Kettles after the 1902 disaster there, and the eruption, 1902. Right. My people settled in a place called Kettles, Bottom Kettles, and here I am today. So, yes. Right. Yes. Thank you for that interjection. Okay? Yes. If we listen attentively, we'll hear you. Okay? Thank you. Okay. Press the silver button. Okay. Okay. Right ahead.
I was telling Zoila, I hope I remember all the questions by the time I get here. But the land is owned in common. All our land is owned in common. However, wherever family is occupied, and some families would have more than others. And that is to say, a particular family may have occupied 20 acres of land. The family was not as big. Person may have 2 children. So they will pass on pretty much 10 acres to each of the children. And the children, if they made, one made 7, one made 5, then would hand it down. We have a system whereby the land is marked out by the individuals who is occupying a portion of that communal land. It is marked out by either trees, rivers, or hedges, flowers, that kind of thing. And to some extent, or to a larger extent, it is sort of private land to that family. So it is with the family until they've passed on. So they hand it down, and it is with the family all the time. One of the things we've been looking at with what the Pegos Nation is doing in Canada is that they have this system called Community Properties Certificate, something like this. And it's working out well for them because indigenous communities all around the world have land in common. And what they do is they have developed it in a way where it's recognized. There's a title to it, but it remains territorial land. It remains common land. But one can use it for doing business to develop themselves. So that is something that we've had students from Winnipeg come down already, looked at it, and it's something that we may want to take on in the future. So we are not selling the lands, we are not privatizing the lands as having a certificate of title. But you're right, younger people are coming up, and as they get smarter, they want to probably have titles so that they can have the modern development way, So we have to consider that. And so we are looking at other indigenous communities, how they've set up trust boards also to attract money to pass on for the younger persons who would want to develop themselves. But as it is, it's common land, and not only the hurricane, I think it is good when you look at the housing, because most persons would really want to have proper housing. And so they would want to have private land because they can get money. Here's that project where a lot of persons are getting houses that they've never already built in a lifetime, as it is now, without having private title to get money from the banks. So that is helping to, I think, keep it level. Would you agree with me, Pross? To keep it level, that there's not that big urge of people really wanting to privatize the land. That's discussions that we've had in the past already, like 20, 30 years ago. We raised that up in panel discussions in the community as to who is for, who is against having to privatize the land. And we did, and with the result, leave it as it is. I think now it is still the same.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. John? Thank you. Any other submissions, questions, whatever? I think.
2008, I was here in Kingston. I'm sorry I forgot. I was with a group, but we spoke to a professor. And he told us about the Garifuna history. Yeah, with the black carrot. So I asked him a question. And he said, if you look at me, what do you see? And then he said, white curry. Yes, that is what I wanted to know. So, does this people exist? Do they exist still in Kingston? People like, that you do not address as Garifuna or Black Cat.
Would like to
So,
make
I
that.
don't know who would like to. No, but because the emphasis is put on Garifuna or Black Cat. So there is a distinction between the white and the black. You see, just wonder.
Yellow.
Or yellow. But are the people also included within that process of recognition of the yeah? What?
All right. Thank you very much. You. Yes. That's right. Okay, I think on the same point. Okay, I think I'll take you to the end of it.
Try to be short.
And then come back.
I hear those figures always talking about, and I sympathize with it, but I don't agree with it, because I think it's a question of building consciousness. And we've been so confused that some of the, in my opinion, some of the cardinal listeners say, we like to, because over the years, we've been so confused and we've been taught to be ashamed of both sides. Ashamed of being African and ashamed of being cardinal. So there's some people who in the center who really, we do not know where we are, or they do not know where they are. So they try to separate themselves because, I mean, we even had the unfortunate case of an official saying publicly, I wasn't brought here in faith, I was trying to separate us. We are one people. We are one people, and Dr. Scott spoke to it this morning. It's synchronized. We are synchronized, we are synchronized people. We come from both. We from all sources, one people. And as the consciousness grows over time, I think you will have a lesson from those unfortunate attitudes if you try to separate themselves. It's only that only time.
Okay. I think we had you before. Yes, and then we'll come to you. Yes.
We have the responsibility for it. Because until I became a little more intellectually curious, I was always an Afghan. Now, well, listen to me very carefully. I knew that my ancestry was Carib, Indian, and African. But consciously when I speak, I will say I am African. We oftentimes negate the Native American part of our ancestry. Or we, like, get beyond simplicity, like this discussion here, that goes along with it. But we are the individual, like, wherever we go, we share this information with the people that we speak to. When I share that with some of the friends that I have, they look at me like, too much work there. Again, they know that they're Carib Indian and West African, but when you tell them about the Native American family, it's Carib Indian. But there's more education that we need to do.
Be more conscious. Okay.
I
Yes.
think when you look, I'm not being biased, but I'll just say as people go to go far as one field, right? The beauty of the Garifuna is wonderful because I've been blessed to attend conferences in Trinidad with a prestigious organization. Oh, this one is working. for the First Peoples Organization. And the first time I went years ago, that just blew my mind, that experience. When I got there, I met my other indigenous blood relatives, right, from Suriname. That's where I met Miss Harriet. And the practices, they're the same. The first time I went, I took along my Ereba and I took along some implement. I said, I'm going to explain. When I got there, I shouldn't have brought it. I shouldn't have brought that, right? Because that indigenous part of me, they're still doing the same thing. The same way we bake the Ereba, the same process, everything they're doing. The dance, and I was showing them the variation of the dance. Like we have a female and a male gestural dance. We call it Arumahani for the male, Abai Mahani. Whereas we do not move, we do this, they do the, they actually do a movement to it, you can compare it. So there are so many similarities, which tells me indeed that this infusion that we have as Garifuna people, right? Then there are certain dances that they don't have, but I think we, when I research about African dances, I can see where my African roots brought that component because of this infusion, right? So I believe that there's something that we have to study further, and you're right. Our history doesn't start here in Urume, although Garifuna were created per se. The infusion happened here, but our ancestry, no. I was told by one of our ancestors to study the flow of the current, and I'm still trying to study the flow. He told me, study the flow of the current, and I said, why? He said, because although everybody's talking about St. Vincent, you have to understand the flow, because part of us came that way, yeah. And then we continue. And then he also told me that to look at the history. He said because Garifuna people did not only stay in St. Vincent, yes, we were created here. He said, but they moved because of the infusion. I may have a cousin on another island, so I'm going to visit my cousin, right? Because I may have siblings from my mom's side, I have siblings from my dad's side, and I have siblings that together they create, right? And so that diversion. So we have a lot to study. That was an eye-opener for me, and I didn't stop to think about that until that ancestor told me that. And he told me that here in Urume when I came 3 years ago, right? Every morning he woke me up and then he gave me some perspective. So I agreed, we have a lot to study, and we must not be bogged down by the differences, because that is the way of the conqueror. That's what they did to us, right? We were on the line, and we were trying to talk to our sister, and she was blank. She said, eventually, she said Haiti, French. So we understand, okay, I don't speak English. I am from Haiti, and I speak French. And I told Mick, look how the conquerors have divided us. A language barrier, but that shouldn't be the focus of why we are, because we are many parts.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, and then
Yes,
just say,
thank you.
briefly say who you are, your name and where you're from, and so on, so we can. Yes.
I was trying to remain quiet, but you guys pulled me to the conversation, so I cannot remain quiet anymore, because I'm very passionate about this type of topic on culture. I think it was Dr. Scott this morning who mentioned the topic of genes and culture. So you cannot challenge a person when identity, which they want to identify themselves. We have come from a lot of struggles of indigenous people since the time of discovery, and we let other people catalog us into segments and to place and treat us differently. And at that present day and age, we should not allow that to happen. We had the ability before to fashion our custom and tradition to make us a people. And many of us share those values. And we have a young generation of people coming up, which are mixed interbreed people. That happened in Dominica, where a lot of young people are intermarriage, and then they're coming up. How do they feel when you go for those thin points there and trying to put, maybe to put future or color? We know the history. We're supposed to be, Kalinago is supposed to be 5'5", short, broad, very strong. The mixture happened of Africa. The boat came in, it sang. The Africans was kind of Caribbeanized, I would say. By on shore, they adopted a culture which we had. They were adult, we share common cultures. And so that add up to the whole creolization of some of our cultures, which we can have traits of Kalinago, of African. But we are Caribbean people, we are Dominican. In Dominica, for example, a lot of our people are trying desperately to identify themselves as Kalinagos. Even those who have no hair in the head, I say, I don't have hair, but I'm Kalinago. So you have many people, and some are very true. And some, because of the stigma in some areas, some people say I'm not, because they're not totally consciousness. When people are fully conscious, I think everybody realizes that we are part of the Caribbean, and we carry sometimes a common heritage in the island. And there are small thin lines that separate us. We all have our rights, so we can coexist, and we can respect each other of who they are as a people. But what makes us very unique and makes us very, very rich is that we have a strong heritage as Caribbean people, as St. Vincent people that carry on. And one should not be discouraged to bring that forward, because that's what makes us who we are and can make us very strong as a people of either islands or the Dominicans and Vincent were putting together. That's make us very rich in our culture. So we want to send a signal because I was wondering here how we speak to ourselves here. The signal we have to put is after we have gone here, the seniors are there. How do we instill that into the young minds that are intermarriage? I have this difficulty because it is getting more and more people are intermarriage. And the white people saw that they would die. They would have finished already. Many reports have read that this time will soon come when this warlike and savage people will liquidate it into the Negro society. Already they were trying to split already. Time will soon come when we'll just melt out. We have proved them wrong. We have survived. And tomorrow I'll be speaking on the survival of indigenous culture, so we can hear more about it tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have room for one or two more. Okay.
African and Native American were victims of the discovery of America, linguistically speaking, because Caribbean is named after the Caribbean, which is a misnomer, a misname, a mistake. Other American people who suffer the same fate is the Eskimos. We know them as the Eskimos, but they call themselves the Inuits. And they come the Eskimos because of called the Eskimos, which is raw meat eaters. So when we're doing Native American studies, we have to have onomastic in mind, name calling. American language, but some of the language was spoken in the whole of the Americas. Today, the only most two countries did national language. Paraguay and Bolivia, and probably in the landlocked. So I want the people to bear that in mind. When they deal with Native American studies, you have to deal with onomastics. Somebody named, you calling them today. You never call them that time. They call in.
Okay.
I want to finish this off for 15 more.
All right. All right. Thank you very much. I think that has brought us to the end of everything. We want to thank everyone who participated, and we'll be back here tomorrow. Same time, same place, and you check your programs to see the topics that will be presented and so on. I want to thank everybody for their contribution on this day. Thank you very much.